I sold my business for my mom's surgery, then she disappeared with the money. It started in a panic. My mom called me one night and said the pain in her leg had gotten worse. She said the doctor found a tumor and that it was urgent. I booked a flight the next morning. I remember sitting in the hospital cafeteria, watching her sign a consent form with hands that trembled more than mine. She kept apologizing like it was her fault. I promised her I would cover it. I meant it. I had just closed the biggest deal of my life 6 months earlier. My startup had been scraping by for years. Then suddenly it worked. Investors were calling. I had a small stake, but it was enough. I could have pulled a bridge loan, taken out equity, or asked my board for an advance, but when I saw my mother pale and in pain, the math disappeared. I told my co-founder I'd sell my share. I told myself it was temporary. Get her through this, then rebuild. 2 weeks later, I signed the papers. The escrow closed in cash. I wired everything to an account in my mom's name the day before surgery. The bank transfer confirmation sat in my inbox like a bomb. I remember staring at it and thinking terrible, messy thoughts. What if this is all a mistake? My mom called to thank me. She sounded relieved and then guilty. She said she would pay me back or repay me when she got insurance sorted or when her disability check came. She said, don't worry. I believed her. She went into surgery. It was ugly. They took more than the tumor. She was in recovery for days. I slept in the chair by her bed and read old magazines. When she finally was discharged, she was fragile. Okay. We celebrated with pizza that tasted like hospital grease. She hugged me, squeezed my hand, and told me to go back to work. She told me she loved me. I left the hospital thinking, everything will be fine. The first crack was a text I missed because my phone was on silent in a meeting. It was from a number I didn't have saved. It said she had to cancel her physical therapy appointment because a friend needed her to watch a kid. I called her after the meeting to confirm. She said she had to run errands, that the vendor would drop off something at the house, that she'd call me later. Small thing. They piled into a day I couldn't keep up with. Then, the call stopped. She didn't pick up. Her phone went to voicemail. I stopped by her apartment. The locksmith was leaving. Her front door was open. Her living room was empty. No pictures, no books, nothing. The pot roast she always burned to a crisp was gone. Her dresser drawers were bare. Her plants were gone. On the kitchen counter was an envelope with a slip from the bank and the wire transfer confirmation folded inside. No note, no goodbye. I told myself she must have gone to the clinic across town or to her sister's. I called neighbors. One neighbor said she saw a young man carrying boxes out of my mom's apartment 2 days earlier. The neighbor said my mom waved and smiled like she was going on a trip. My stomach dropped in a way that made it hard to breathe. I called the bank. The teller was polite and then cold. The account had been drained 2 days after the surgery. All the money, gone. There were multiple transfers, one to a gambling site, one to an account in another state, a big withdrawal at an airport kiosk. The transfers were made on the same day as the locksmith. The bank couldn't reverse them. They said my mom was the account holder. She had the right. I called the doctor. They said she had checked out and left with someone who said they were a friend. The nurse remembered her smiling, said she seemed excited, like she had a plan. That image of my mom smiling and walking out with boxes felt like someone pulled a rug from under me. I drove to every place the transfers pointed to. I booked a cheap PI because I had sold the business and had no runway left, but I had to try something. The PI found a trail of airport receipts, hotel charges, a car rental. The last known card use was in a casino in another state. Then everything went quiet. My sister called and said she didn't want to get involved. She said our mom was an adult, that she had the right to spend her money, that I had made my own bed. Her voice sounded like relief. She said mom had always been selfish, but that didn't mean anything. I felt stabbed. Where was the family who used to rally? They evaporated. I went to the police. They were sympathetic but blunt. The money was gone. My mom was an adult and had the right to leave. Missing person? Not unless there was evidence of foul play. The police said I could file a civil case. The lawyer they recommended asked if I had evidence of coercion or fraud. I had receipts and a wire confirmation. I had my gut. The lawyer said it was an uphill battle. I felt small. The first holy shit moment hit when I found a photo online. It was a social media selfie from a woman who tagged my mom as her friend. My mom looked sunburned and happy on a beach, a new chest tattoo peeking out like a kid trying on someone else's identity. The comments were full of exclamation points and hearts, and someone asking when my mom was coming to see them. My stomach dropped into my shoes. She wasn't sick anymore. She was on vacation. I confronted her over the phone. She said she needed freedom. She said she couldn't handle being told to go to rehab, to take pills, to live by a schedule. She said she had given me a hard time when I sold the business and called me selfish. She said she used the money to start over because she was tired of being sick and dependent and always apologizing. She said she was sorry and somehow expected me to understand. I didn't understand. I felt used. I felt like I had sold a piece of myself for a person who abandoned me like it was a closet I'd cleaned out. I blamed myself for trusting her. I blamed her for lying. For a while, I tried to be reasonable. I flew to the city where she was last seen. I showed up at the cheap hotel. The clerk said a woman matching my mom's description had checked out a week ago. She said the guest paid cash. My chest froze. The PI found a rental agreement under a different name. I sat in a Denny's and wrote lists of things I could do. Sue, call the press, post everything publicly, beg on social media. I told my therapist I felt like I had been robbed of more than money. I'd been robbed of a future. I tried the public option. I made an online post asking for help finding her. The post blew up. People shared it. My inbox filled with strangers' theories. She ran off with a lover, she was in a cult, she was dead, she was fine. A local news station called. The story went on air. I felt powerful for the first time in weeks. People wanted to help. Then came the false victory. A woman called saying she saw my mom in a diner with a man who introduced her as his girlfriend. I staked out the diner for 3 days. I watched couples, families, a man with a child's birthday cake. I thought this would be it. A live capture. A confrontation where truth would spill out and apologies would rain down and the money would be wired back to me. I imagined hugging her and saying why, and she would cry and give it back. She never came. The person who had called me lied. My confidence crashed. I felt idiotic. The TV had amplified me and then exposed my vulnerability. Friends started pulling away. Some said I was being dramatic. Other friends pretended everything was fine. The bank had already closed my file because there was nothing they could do. My inbox had death threats and cruel jokes about selling out for surgery money. I watched my life shrink to bills and lawyer invoices and an empty bank balance. My lowest point came in the form of an eviction notice. I had moved out of my office loft to free up cash the month after the sale. I had planned to take a small apartment while I rebuilt. The buyer's escrow paid quickly, but my cash flow was tied up in closing costs and taxes. The money I had wired to my mom was supposed to be temporary. It wasn't. I had no runway. I couldn't sleep. I felt like I had died and someone had left a note saying sorry. The symbolic death was standing in a storage unit and watching someone else take the box that had all my original company prototypes. The thing I had built with 2 people and a lot of nights. It felt like I was handing over the last physical proof of who I was to strangers. I sat on the concrete floor and cried until my throat hurt. Then, sitting on that floor, I realized something that felt like a small, ugly truth. I had always been the fixer. I had always been the one to pay, to apologize, to rearrange my life to clean other people's messes. My mom had learned to depend on that. Maybe she had always used me. Maybe I had always let it happen. That didn't excuse her theft, but it explained how we got here. I changed strategy. Instead of trying to drag her back to my definition of home, I decided to protect what I had left. I consolidated what money I had, paused legal action that cost more than it was worth, and sued for the last small piece that might be recoverable, transfer receipts that were under her identity. I took every document to a lawyer who specialized in elder and family fraud. My therapist helped me stop pretending I could fix everything with cash. My friend Jonah, my co-founder who had stayed on, offered to let me come back part-time. He didn't say you owe me or I told you so. He offered a safety net without judgment. Then the confrontation happened by accident. I tracked a social media check-in to a hospice fundraiser in a nearby town. I went with a plan that was more about closure than money. I stood in the back and watched my mom sit at a folding table with a new community of people, laughing and tossing fishbowl slips into a raffle. She looked like she had traded my version of safety for a loose, dangerous kind of joy. I walked up to her and handed her a stack of receipts I'd printed. I told her she had taken everything. I told her I had nothing left. I told her the eviction had been served and I had sold my prototypes. I told her I'd sold my business for her and now I had nothing. She looked at the receipts and then at me. Her smile stopped being an apology and became something I didn't recognize. She said she was starting over, that she was afraid of being her old self again, that she couldn't live by other people's rules. She asked me why I couldn't understand that. I told her that I had understood enough to sell my stake and to expect an adult to act like one. I told her that freedom didn't give someone the right to destroy another person's life. She asked for time. She asked me to meet her later, alone. I said I had already given all my time. The people at the fundraiser watched like it was a soap opera. Some of them nudged their spouses, some pulled out their phones. My sister appeared out of nowhere and stood beside my mom like she had always been there. She whispered that mom had always been dissatisfied, that she had always run. She said I should forgive her. I realized in that moment that my family line meant more loyalty to myth than to fact. My allies were choosing comfort over truth. I left without money and without closure and with a strange small victory. I didn't beg. I didn't collapse. I said the words that were hardest for me and didn't retreat. I set a boundary I had never tried before. I told her we were done financing her life. I told her if she wanted anything from me, it would be my time on her terms, not my money. I told her I would help her find resources, but I wouldn't pay for her escape. 2 months later, the police called. Someone had found her wallet dumped behind a grocery store. She had been staying in a church shelter for a week and had no intent of returning the money. There was no criminal charge. She had acted within the law. The civil suit dragged on and cost more than it was worth, but it forced some records out. I recovered enough to stop the eviction and to pay the lawyer who handled the last part. It wasn't all, but it was something. The final scene isn't a movie. My mom and I didn't make up. She called me on my birthday, said she missed me, and asked if I could send a little money for a new pair of shoes. I told her no. She asked why. I told her I had learned to value myself differently. I didn't shout, I just hung up. I didn't get my business back, or the months I had spent sleeping in hospitals, or the prototypes I watched leave a storage unit. I lost more than money, but I got something else, a boundary that felt like a small spine. I went back to work part-time with Jonah. We rebuilt slowly. I started therapy more seriously. I learned to say no without guilt. The opposite of that frantic promise in the hospital waiting room is a quiet truth now. I will help, but I will not sell myself again. My mom still texts from time to time, asking about my life, sometimes with a photo of a beach, sometimes with an apology. I read them and I answer twice, once with small human things and once with a line that feels like armor. I won't be her bank. I won't be erased for her choices. It hurts. It still does. But the chaos that started with a wire transfer ended with me choosing to protect what I have left. I sold my business to save her, and she disappeared with the money. I paid a price I shouldn't have had to pay. But I learned, late and messy, that love without boundaries is not love at all.